Welcome to the Positive Sports Podcast, where we like to talk about sports from a positive angle. Coming at you today with a special NBA playoffs preview episode. I will be your host this evening, Ed Montana. Alongside me today, absolutely no one. You get me. Like Brucey said in The Longest Yard, it's Brucey's time. In this case, it's Ed's time. It's my show to do by myself. Welcome to all of my fans. If you would like to reach the show, you can do so by emailing the show at positivesports10@gmail.com. Positivesports10@gmail.com. If you want to get a hold of me, my Twitter handle, eMontana21. If you want to get a hold of that other guy, whatever his name is, Alex, I believe, you can reach him at Brooklyn Gaucho on Twitter. So, like I said in my intro, this is going to be a special NBA playoffs preview. The end of the season was very exciting, and now we're ready for the playoffs. Basketball season's kind of long. The playoffs are really long, but let's face it. We only play the regular season to get to the postseason, right? So, without any further ado, let's get to it. Let's start off in the Eastern Conference. I'm going to go through the playoff matchups. I'm just going to go through the first round because the NBA playoffs take forever. If I went through all of it, you would forget my second round and conference final picks and championship picks, and it'd all be for naught. We'll talk about it more and more as the weeks come and as the playoffs progress, so we'll just do it that way. We'll start at the very top. Toronto with a record of 59-23 going up against the Washington Wizards with a record of 43-39. This is a 1 versus 8 matchup, but don't be deceived. You have a Toronto team that is not flush with playoff experience, although they've been there the last few years. They have not been very deep. They have not made it very far in the playoffs in their runs, and have really proven to kind of shy away from the lights. They've had a great season, but the East is kind of down in terms of talent, rich, talented teams. The Cavs weren't what they've normally been. The Celtics went through a lot of injuries. Philadelphia is a young and up-and-coming team. So they really didn't have a whole lot of competition. So as impressive as it is to be a 1 seed, theirs is not quite as impressive as other teams in previous years. The Wizards are the exact opposite of a surprise. They're an 8 seed, but they're probably a little bit better than that. Their record was only 43-39, but remember, John Wall was out for 20-some-odd games, I believe. 24 games, I think it was, with a knee injury. Here's the other caveat. The Wizards beat the Raptors last year in the playoffs. It got a little testy. This is a series that's going to have a lot of spark to it for a first-round playoff series, and is going to be a lot of fun to watch. I think the Wizards can pull this off. I'm not sold on DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry in the playoffs. They're good, but can they carry their team to a win in this series against a rival, or a team that's become their rival in the last couple of years? And Washington, they're getting better, especially now that Wall is back. Bradley Beal's a real problem for people. I think this is going to be a pretty good series. I'm actually predicting an upset. I think the Wizards will take this in 6. Moving on, your 2 seed versus 7 seed matchup. The Boston Celtics with a record of 55-27 against the Milwaukee Bucks with a record of 44-38. This is intriguing because I really don't want to pick either team. It's a problem here. The Celtics are good, but their 2 main stars are not going to be there. Kyrie Irving and Gordon Hayward. Gordon Hayward's been out all season, but Kyrie Irving has been on and off during the season. He had surgery. He will miss the entire playoffs. So the team now really falls on Brown and Jason Tatum, 2 young guys. I think Marcus Smart is also out. So it is going to be an issue for this team. There's 2 seed, 55 wins. Brad Stevens has done a phenomenal job with that team. He is very quickly becoming a upper echelon coach. Greg Popovich isn't going to last forever, and Brad Stevens is becoming that kind of coach. It is scary to think what that team could be next year with Kyrie Irving and Gordon Hayward hopefully healthy for the entire year. On the other side, you have a Milwaukee team that is really, I think, really in trouble. They could win this series only because of the fact that Boston is rather depleted. But it's going to be an issue for this team. They're just not a very good team. They fired Jason Kidd during the season, and they really haven't found a direction. Sure, they've got Giannis, the Greek freak, and he's a lot of fun to watch, don't get me wrong. But that doesn't always translate to wins. And Jabari Parker is, he's in the last year of a deal. You would think he's really gonna show up to try to make this next deal a really healthy one. So, but they really haven't gelled, and their record shows that 44-38 in the East is just not very impressive. It's going to be a challenge, I think, for Milwaukee, purely from a cohesiveness and coaching perspective. I think that Boston will win this series. It won't be easy because, like I said, Boston is depleted. It's going to be hard for them to find ways to win games. But Brad Stevens does a masterful job of player rotation and schemes to beat other teams. And in a 7-game series, I'll take a depleted Celtics and Brad Stevens over fun to watch, but not very good. They can't really pick a direction on how they're going, Milwaukee Bucks team. I actually think this is going to be pretty easy for the Celtics. I'm picking the Celtics in 5. Moving on, the 3 seed, the Philadelphia 76ers, against the 6 seed, the Miami Heat. At 52-30, the Sixers had a fantastic season. They finished the season on a 13-game run. The Heat, on the other hand, stumbled into the playoffs. They're at 44-38. Now, these teams Miami has a chance. In their meetings, they've played them well, and I believe the last time they played, Miami beat the Sixers. The key for the Sixers is going to be, how do these young guys, Simmons, Fultz, Embiid if he's back in time, how do they perform under the playoff pressure? Remember, playoff basketball in the NBA is very different from the regular season. The refs swallow their whistles a little bit more, and you've got one team focused on you. And you only have one team to focus on. The defensive schemes get much, much more rigid. You're not playing as frequently, so you're not tired. So you have a full gas tank to go after each other. It's different, and it'll be interesting to see how these players will perform in this scenario. Additionally, you have Embiid, who's coming off of surgery for a broken orbital bone. In past cases, I've heard a broken orbital bone is a problem for your vision, your depth perception, and also for your balance, which for a big guy, that's kind of important. Actually, for any NBA player, it's probably kind of important. So it's going to be interesting to see how that team handles this change in pressure and how they do against a Miami Heat team that, Eric Spoelstra's been all the way to the top of the mountain. He knows what this is like. They've got Dwayne Wade, which has a very calming hand on that team, and Hassan Whiteside, who's pretty much lived up to his contract that he got over the summer. So it's going to be a tough matchup, but I'm going to take the young guns. I believe Philadelphia can really make some noise in this playoff scenario this year. They are a young team. They're really good. Ben Simmons is your Rookie of the Year. And if Joel Embiid comes back okay from the broken orbital surgery, I think they're going to make some real noise in the East. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch. They say don't drink on camera. I can't help it. I'm going to drink anyway. I don't care who they are. Actually, I don't even know who they are, so that's why I do it. Anyway, moving on. The 4 versus 5 seed matchup. That will pit your Cleveland Cavaliers at a record of 50-32 against your Indiana Pacers with a record of 48-34. Now, it is kind of weird to talk about the Cleveland Cavaliers being your 4 seed in a in any playoff scenario, especially, well, now that they have LeBron James. Obviously, when they didn't have LeBron James, it's a little dicey. It's weird to talk about a LeBron James-led team being a 4 seed. Now, Indiana has overachieved this year, but I still think that when we get to this different atmosphere of playoff basketball, the Cavaliers are going to be too much. The Cavaliers' main question is not going to be LeBron James. We know what we're going to get from him. We're going to get top-notch performance, leadership, and clutch shooting probably. The question is going to be his supporting cast. He really doesn't have one. And so it's going to be difficult, but I think he can lead them past an Indiana team that it has Oladipo as the face of the team at this point, and they've had it. By any stretch of the imagination, they've had a successful season. The fact is that they were leading the that division pretty late in the season before the Cavs kind of came on at the trade deadline and kind of took over. But they weren't even projected to make the playoffs. They were going to be, they were looking at a lottery pick before the season started. They lost Paul George, and oh my goodness, it's going to be a disaster for the Indiana Pacers. Not the case. They have played well. They play very cohesively. They're a hustle team. And that would give a lot of teams problems, except for one led by one LeBron James. And again, I think LeBron is going to be too much. I think they're going to win this series in 6 games. I almost dare to say 5. I just don't think that Indiana has what it takes to really hang with them in the spotlight and intensity of a playoff series. I don't know if I mentioned Philadelphia, Miami. I think the Young Guns will take it in 6 games. I don't know if I said that. I know I told you guys that I picked Philadelphia, but I didn't know how many games I said. So there you go, Philadelphia in 6. So just to recap, I think the Wizards will knock off Toronto in 6. I think the Celtics will take care of Milwaukee in 5. Philadelphia over Miami in 6. And the Cavs over the Pacers. I'm going to change it. I'm going to go Cavs in 5. I just don't think Indiana has the horses to hang with the Cavaliers. So your conference semifinals in the East will shape up as follows. Boston will go up against Philadelphia. Washington will go up against Cleveland. That will be very interesting, folks, because if you look at those 4 teams, man, you can make an argument for all of them except for maybe Washington. But even Washington, with a matchup against Cleveland, who's not as good as they were in previous years, and the continued reemergence or the continued reintegration of Wall with Bell, it could be tough for them. And then you've got Boston and Philadelphia, 2 really young teams without Kyrie Irving and Gordon Hayward there. And, I don't know what's going to happen there if that matchup comes to fruition. So that'll be an interesting talking point. By then, my partner in crime, who shall remain nameless, will be back, and I'm sure we'll be talking about that further. Moving on to the West. This is going to be, in my opinion, the most interesting first round in a long time. I've often said that I thought that the NBA playoffs should just be 8 teams. I've always thought that the first round is generally a big waste of time, and all we do is run the risk of some star getting injured and messing up better matchups down the line that we could have had, right? But obviously, from what I talked about in the East, I think it's going to be pretty competitive. And here in the West, I think it's going to be super competitive and a lot of fun to watch. So we'll start at the very top. Houston, the best record in the NBA, and not by a little bit, by a lot, by 6 games. They have a record of 65-17, most wins in franchise history, going up against Minnesota with a record of 47-35, a Minnesota team that had to go to overtime of the final game of the season to clinch their playoff spot. So they have already played a playoff game. That last game of the season for them against the Denver Nuggets, it was win and in for both of them. Very clearly a playoff type game. It had very much a playoff game atmosphere. It was a lot of fun to watch. The question for Houston has always been how far can they go in the playoffs. And Mark D'Antonio has gotten a bad rap as a poor playoff coach. But he's going to have no excuses this year. He's got the best 1-2 combo in the business right now, with Steph Curry being out. The best 1-2 combo in this playoffs right now is James Harden and Chris Paul. The knock on Chris Paul has always been he doesn't go far in the playoffs. This is his chance to eradicate that. James Harden has a little bit of that reputation as well. But these 2 guys have played lights out all season long. They have really proven that in clutch time against these big teams, they can win basketball games. I am expecting a lot. My personal MVP is James Harden. I think he's had the best season of the best team. And look, they've got the best record, not by 1 or 2 games, by 6. So there's something to be said there. They have been considerably better than number 2 in the league. Their supporting cast is solid, and I think Mark D'Antonio knows what he's doing with this team. He knows how to push the right buttons and make the right substitutions at the right time. He's getting clutch performances out of players all over the place, Trevor Ariza and the like. And I think Houston is primed for a run deep into this playoffs. Minnesota's not to be slept on, for sure. These young guys have been playing playoff basketball essentially for the last couple weeks of the season, and they have played a de facto playoff game against Denver. And they've won. They've survived. Karl-Anthony Towns, I think, is on his way to becoming an elite player. Jimmy Butler, I think, is a fantastic basketball player. I would dare to say he's probably one of the more underrated players in the NBA. I don't think he gets as much love as he would like, as he deserves. And Tom Thibodeau, I think, is probably the most underrated coach in the NBA. The problem is they don't have much of a supporting cast. And even those two guys have their moments where, not so much Jimmy Butler, but Karl-Anthony Towns shows a lot of offensive prowess and a lot of offensive potential, but he does have his moments where he kind of disappears. And that's going to be a problem for Minnesota. Look, Minnesota might have a shot against other teams in this conference, not named the Golden State Warriors, but they have, I hate to say this, right, because anything can happen. That's why they play the games. I think they have no chance against the Rockets. I expect the Rockets to run through them like a hot knife through butter. I think that they will win this series in 4 games and move on, rest up for their next matchup in the second round. So, moving on, the number 2 seed are the Golden State Warriors with a record of 58-24, and they will be going up against the 7 seed, the San Antonio Spurs, with a record of 47-35. This is San Antonio's 21st consecutive playoff appearance. Put that in perspective. 21 years. They have not missed the playoffs this century. That is impressive. What Greg Popovich does is absolutely amazing. Golden State is probably the hardest team to read coming into the playoffs. Of all the big name teams, this is the hardest one to read. They're very clearly a championship caliber team. With Steph Curry on the court, they are for sure a championship caliber team. They've won championships, right? So we know that. Steph Curry will not be on the floor to start the playoffs. I don't know exactly when he's going to be back, but he won't be around for this first round series. But they still have Kevin Durant and Draymond Green, and they've got Klay Thompson. They've got a wealth of talent. They've got a wealth of experience. They've got a wealth of winning ways. They have the younger version of Phil Jackson as far as Zen Masters are concerned, and Steve Kerr. I think he knows how to push the right buttons with those guys. And, when you win as much as they do and you win championships and you go to the finals 3 years in a row, it's hard to get up every night for the regular season basketball games. And I think they've been a little bit flat thinking that they can turn it on when the playoffs come around, right? They know how to play playoff basketball. They figure, hey, we'll just turn it on then. That's a 50-50 proposition. We've seen teams that can do it, and we've seen teams that can't. And it's a very, very dicey situation. If I was a Golden State fan, it is, pick your poison, pick what you want to pick, right? The glass is either half empty or half full, but it's worrisome. The good thing for them is that they're playing against a San Antonio team that, they're a 7 seed, and rightfully so. They're not a very good basketball team. They miss Kawhi Leonard. And LaMarcus Aldridge, just really hasn't proven himself to be much come playoff time. And so there is some concern that team is just really flat. And more importantly, I think there's a concern for the future for that team. I think they're looking to 2019 more so than they are looking towards the 2018 playoffs. They want to figure out what they're going to do with the Kawhi Leonard situation. They want him for sure, but they want a committed Kawhi Leonard, not one that's like, maybe, maybe not, So I think the Golden State Warriors are getting a bit of a bye here in the first round. They're going to make it through, I think, relatively easily. I do think that the competitive juices will get flowing for Kevin Durant, Draymond Green, and Klay Thompson, and they'll turn it up a notch here for sure. Certainly enough to take out the San Antonio Spurs. I'm predicting the Golden State Warriors in 5. Moving on to the 3 versus 6 matchup, our 3 seed is the Portland Trail Blazers with a record of 49-33, going up against the New Orleans Pelicans with a record of 48-34. Man, this one's gonna be fun. I think Damian Lillard, say that fast 3 times, and CJ McCollum are quite possibly the best backcourt in basketball. They are 2 phenomenal guards, and they really push the pace of the game and make it very difficult on the other team, really on both ends of the floor. They're very good defensively as well. And New Orleans has overachieved with losing DeMarcus Cousins to a season-ending Achilles injury early on. We thought it would be too much for them to make the playoffs, but Anthony Davis is a beast. And I will be very curious to see how the playoff brow, not the unibrow, the playoff brow, does in the playoffs. I think he's a fantastic basketball player. I think he is slowly but surely working his way to being one of the top 3 or 4 players in the league. Right, I think pretty soon we're going to talk about him alongside LeBron James and Steph Curry and Kevin Durant. I think he's that good. I think he's going to be that good. But this might be a little bit too big of a bite for him. Certainly if they had DeMarcus Cousins, it'd be a different story. That 1-2 punch would be really difficult for any team to handle. And it would be tough for Portland. But Portland plays unbelievable defense. I'm sure they will be focused on Anthony Davis. Will try to make life as difficult as possible for him. I think he's still going to get his. He's just not going to have enough help to take out the Portland Trail Blazers. I say Portland wins the series, but I think it will go 6. And I almost dare to say 7, but I think I'm going to stick with 6 in the Portland-New Orleans series. Finally, the last first-round series we have, the 4 versus 5 matchup in the West. You have the Oklahoma City Thunder with a record of 48-34 against the Utah Jazz with a record of 48-34. Where have we heard that before, right? Really tight from 3 all the way down to 8 or 9, even the Denver Nuggets. It was really tight. So not surprising, our 4 versus 5 matchup is a dead heat at 48-34. Oklahoma City does have the home court advantage in the series. I think this will be the most entertaining series to watch. You've got on one side you have Russell Westbrook, who is a statistical machine and really one of the best players in the NBA. He's a fantastic player, averaged a triple-double again this year. I think it's only been done one time before. I think the Big O is the only guy who's done it aside from Russell Westbrook. He's just a fantastic ball player. And alongside him, you got Paul George, who I think is, I think OKC spent most of the season trying to find how to make their big 3 work. Westbrook, Paul George, and Carmelo Anthony. Carmelo Anthony's really not a big 3 kind of guy anymore. He's just, he's older. He's just not that good. And quite frankly, defensively, he's never been good enough that you can put him in that big 3 category, which is why his teams have really never gone very far in the playoffs, which is unfortunate because he's a hell of an offensive player. But Russell Westbrook, Paul George, and Carmelo Anthony, and really the Oklahoma City Thunder in general, have played very well against the top teams in the league. Where they struggled during the season was against the sub-500 teams. So everyone they're going to face in the playoffs are obviously playoff teams. So we should see the best version of the Oklahoma City Thunder. I think it's going to be very interesting how those guys continue to gel together through this playoff run and what they can do against Utah. Utah is a young team. The Utah situation is very interesting. It's the first team in quite a long time to be led to the in scoring, the first playoff team to be led in scoring in quite a while, in Mitchell. Mitchell has developed into a very, very nice leader on that team. The point guard is Ricky Rubio. This is his first taste of the playoffs in a contract year. He's played big games internationally, so I don't expect the spotlight of the playoffs to really affect his play. I expect him to rise above and have a good series. And then you've got Rudy Gobert, who missed out on 26 games, I believe it was, during the season. He is back in full swing. So Utah is a very formidable challenge. The other thing to remember, Utah has been playing lights-out basketball. I believe they're 25-5 over the last 30 games. So they have been playing basketball at a very high level, winning a lot. So, that being said, I think this matchup is going to be the most entertaining. And I think at the end of the day, I think it's going to be too much for Westbrook. And I think having Gobert with a strong presence in the paint and Ricky Rubio and Mitchell working the backcourt, I think will produce a victory for them in this series. I expect this series to go 7 games, and I think it'll probably be the highlight of the first round of the playoffs, and I'm picking Utah to advance. So, to recap the West, I have Houston advancing in 4, Golden State advancing in 5, Portland advancing in 6, and Utah advancing in 7. So, that would make our second round matchups Houston versus Utah, Golden State versus Portland. That should be a lot of fun as well. This is the best, honestly, I think this is the best, probably the best first 2 rounds of the NBA playoffs that we've seen in a long time. So I'm very excited to see that. The last week of the basketball season was fantastic. And the best part of it is I think there are some young guys that are going to make us take notice of them that we haven't looked at before. Previous seasons, it's all been about LeBron, Russell Westbrook, Kevin Durant, and Steph Curry. And those guys are there, and I'm sure they're going to play great. But this year we have additional players. You could have DeMar DeRozan breaking out for Toronto. You've got the Greek Freak, who's a ton of fun to watch. You've got the players a whole bunch of players in Philly, right? You've got Fultz, who he seems to be getting better here coming into the end of the season. Simmons, Embiid if he's healthy. Not to mention he's a good follow on social media. And then in the West, finally the emergence of James Harden and Chris Paul. Can they really do it? Can they really take their team to the promised land? In Minnesota, you've got Karl Anthony Towns, who's a great young guy to watch. And then you've got Damian Lillard. Oh my goodness, why do I struggle with that? That guy, Damian Lillard from the Portland Trail Blazers. He is this won't be his first time to shine in the NBA playoffs. He's shined before, but he gets another opportunity, and I think we're going to take notice of it. Along with CJ McCollum, who is, I think, very quietly becoming a storm. And then in Utah, you've got Mitchell, who I think is going to be a lot of fun to watch. He's a hell of a player. And then, of course, Anthony Davis in New Orleans, we've seen him, and I think he's already made a pretty good name for himself. So there's a lot of good young talent to look at here in the playoffs and to see how they're going to progress going forward. It should be a lot of fun. I can't wait to watch the playoffs. I love this stuff, especially with the hockey playoffs going on at the same time, man. It is a blast. So, with that being said, that wraps up my NBA playoff preview, at least the first round of it. I'm sure that when Alex comes back from wherever he is, we will talk more as the first round progresses and on into the second round and so on. As always, folks, you can get a hold of the show at positivesports10@gmail.com. That's positivesports10@gmail.com. If you want to reach out and connect with my brother and myself, you can reach him at Brooklyn Gaucho on Twitter. As he always says, don't be a leader, be a follower. Follow him at Brooklyn Gaucho. If you have any comments for me about my wonderful basketball picks, you may as well just go to Vegas and bet it, because it's going to happen exactly the way I just told you in the past 25, 30 minutes or whatever. So if you want to go to Vegas and make some money on that, or lose some money and then yell at me on Twitter, you can do that by reaching me at eMontana21 on Twitter. As always, folks, ignore the negativity. Be the positivity.